Welcome back. 4.5 years into the Iraq War, and the challenge for the news media of how to report the story is getting no easier. Record-breaking death tolls amongst journalists, criticism that too much reporting comes from the Green Zone or from briefings in Washington. The coverage of Iraq seems to satisfy no one. And then there are the embeds, journalists who sign on to the Pentagon's embedded reporter program, which assigns them to military units in return for a contractual agreement that gives the military veto power over their material. The Listening Post's Salah Qadar now on a controversial relationship and the impact that embedded reporting has had on the world's biggest news story.
To trace the roots of the US military's embedded reporter program, you have to go back to the first Gulf War in 1991.
The Gulf War began just before midnight British time.
That war was covered at a distance. American firepower lit up television screens the world over, but the lack of images from the battlefield, up close and personal, frustrated news organizations and the Pentagon alike.
Some crises really bring out the worst in modern broadcasting, modern television.
The Americans and the British have got soldiers fighting
and Australians
bloody country, and Australians, and we want to go and see what's going on.
There were 2,000 journalists parked in Kuwait during the 2003 invasion of Iraq with nothing to do. The whole thing's gone mad, and it has lent itself, of course, to manipulation, the playing of favourites with certain governments letting people, certain armies embedding certain sorts of journalism. It's wide open to abuse.
The media and the military had 12 years between conflicts in the Gulf to design a new coverage model, a period that coincided with an explosion in 24-hour news and a growing appetite for material. By the time Iraq II rolled around, the Pentagon had a new plan on how wars should be covered.
This looks like war, but these aren't soldiers. Their report is training for the Pentagon's new concept for the press: embedded journalists.
Under the new model, the Pentagon invited journalists to train as embeds.
This battle has been going on for 7 hours now, and as the day progresses, is only getting chaotic.
And by March 2003, there were 775 journalists embedded with US or coalition forces in Iraq. The Pentagon said this was a way to tell real stories from the battlefield, but were the embedded reporters journalists or propaganda tools?
Censorship is going to be applied, but censorship is almost as old as the broadcasting and the reporting of wars. And if it's censorship on grounds of operational security, then I'd accept that. It's not a good deal, but it's the only deal there is, because increasingly in the wars of the 21st century, the armies control the battlefield, and you can't sneak around the side.
The only way that you're going to embed and not be a propaganda tool for the military is if you basically go in once, do your story, and it's a one-shot deal, because you're not going to get a second try.
Dar Jamail is an American freelance reporter who has been to Iraq many times, but has never embedded.
The embed program was set up by the Pentagon as a means of information control. It was set up as a propaganda tool. And if you want to embed, you have to sign papers that gives the military the right to censor your material. So you could go in, if they don't really know who you are, you haven't embedded before, and then you could go in and do a very critical story. But you're not going to get another chance to embed after that. So it would be a one-shot deal.
Tom Roberts embedded in order to make a documentary and spent a month as an embed. He and his team shot an award-winning film, A Company of Soldiers, which chronicled the war through the eyes of men and women in uniform.
It's clear with the embedded structure that there are whole kinds of landmines that you can step on, ways you can get it wrong, mistakes you can make. You can fool yourself. You can get caught up in these guys' lives. You can think in terms that they are actually the most important thing about it. Well, in actual fact, that your emotional attachment to these men because you shared something with them can outweigh the reality you've come to film, right? So that's the dilemma that you have.
The CNN series Road to Baghdad told the story of the Iraq invasion through the news channel's embedded reporters.
Put on your flak jacket and helmet.
This is the 9th time now we'll open as many hours roughly.
Martin Bell, a veteran of many conflicts, is one of few journalists to report from the battlefield in Gulf War I. He says embed reports provide a useful but narrow picture.
But it only makes sense if there is a whole spectrum of coverage, if there are alternatives and complementary angles, like there should be somebody in Baghdad, there should be somebody at the headquarters, maybe with the soldiers' families, and above all, ideally, there should be somebody on the other side.
You can only get to it from one particular angle, because every other angle would be deadly. You would either be kidnapped or you'd be shot. So you have only one vantage point to get right to the edge. But I can tell you, when you're at the edge, when things are flying and people's lives are on the line and killing as people are attempting to kill each other, then there is no censorship. I mean, you are just in a world where other things pertain.
If you're getting all your news from a single embedded reporter or from only embedded reporters, then shame on you as the viewer, not shame on the reporter for being there.
Josh Rushing is a former US Marine who now works at Al Jazeera, and he argues embeds have their uses.
I think you're getting more information out of this war more quickly than ever before. I mean, I know there's a lot of controversy about the embedded reporters during the invasion. They did kind of give a biased report because they were possibly too close to the troops. But in history, what other military has said, give us your reporters, we'll put them in all our units and let you see what's happening real time. I mean, I think that really speaks to the openness of the U.S. military, kind of surprisingly open.
What you were doing was trading freedom for access. You were given the whole battle plan. You were up there with the frontline troops. And I accepted that because most war reporters have never done any soldiering, so they don't see things from a soldier's point of view. And we saw things there that we wouldn't have got at otherwise.
What comes next in the evolving art of war reporting? It's already here. Soldiers are shooting their own video, posting on the web, or even making a full-length documentary out of it, like this one, Severe Clear, billed as having no reporters, no politics, and no censors.
Taking heads of casualties, 10 Marines dead. The date today is 24th of March, 2003.
Dude, you're gonna get some good video when we're out there.
But this new genre of reporting, if it can be called that, will not satisfy the growing appetite of the news media. And given the success of the embed program from the US military's point of view, we'll be seeing more of it in future wars. But it should be a case of embedded journalists beware.
Next time it happens, you say yes, but. You have to say yes because it's the only way you're going to get anywhere near the action. The alternative is just to leave the field to the unthinking, unquestioning journalists and the big corporations who happen to be in the pockets of the government and let them be the only witnesses. So I think you have to say yes, but you have to be fairly skeptical about the product.
And that goes for reporters and news consumers alike.
Here are some Global Village voices on embeds and the reporting of the Iraq War.
I think you have to ask yourself what you get if you don't have embedded journalism. And that's to say very little access to battlefields and battlefield situations. So I think to some extent in modern warfare, if you want to report on sophisticated armies with sophisticated public affairs operations, you need embedding.
I think as the media has become increasingly commercial and moved away from the sort of public interest values that it used to have, what you see is that journalists too have started to value their own skin more than necessarily reporting dangerous situations for public interest. I really long for the days when journalists would get out there and seriously put themselves at risk in order to tell a story that otherwise would not have been told.
Finally, most of you have seen Star Trek, the television show, and/or Star Trek, the movie, and/or Star Trek, The Next Generation. But have you ever seen Star Trek, the Turkish remake? The World Wide Web is littered with various remakes of some famous television brands, but this one is the final frontier. Check out the pointy ears on the Vulcan. Star Trek, the Turkish remake, is our internet video of the week. We'll see you next time at the Listening Post.
Kaptanın seyir defteri. Yıldız tarihi 2520.1. Ne kadar kaldı Mr. Sol? 1327.28 kaptan.
İniş hazırlıkları tamam kaptan.
Teşekkür ederim Mr. Spark. Gezegen hakkında bilgi verin.
Gezegende profesör ve karısından başka canlı yok kaptan. Yalnız robotlar var. İyon ışınları hazırsa enerjile. Mantık dışı.